Well, hey there. And it is good to see you guys. Hey, do me a favor, whether you're here in the room, whether you're watching online, would you just turn to the person next to you and go, I'm so glad you get to sit next to this all of the time. Isn't that great? We're so glad that you're with us. If you're joining us online, if you're at our Kenosha campus, our Racine campus, the weekend on Wednesday crowd that we have here as well. Wow. That's the only reason I come. Oh, no, we're so excited that you're a part of what God is doing here. And it's an honor for me to be able to be here. I love what God is doing here at Great Lakes Church. It's an honor to be able to just be a part of the team. If we haven't met, my name is Skyler. I'm one of the teaching pastors that gets to jump in and help communicate every so often. And man, before we get started, I just want to take a moment. Everywhere that I go, whenever I have an opportunity, I always want to honor the staff and the pastoral leadership of the churches that I get to be a part of serving in ways like this. In the last 2 years, there have been more people resigning from ministry than ever before and since I've been alive. I think most people have felt overwhelmed and just burdened. And then on top of that, there's a global pandemic, I guess, and all kinds of things. And it puts so much stress and pressure. I just want to encourage you. You have an amazing pastor and staff that helps lead Great Lakes Church. And Dave and those guys, I know you know that. But it's not just Dave. I mean, it's some incredible pastors that are a part of this staff team, volunteers who serve. And I just want to encourage you, just continue praying. Continue to pray for your pastors. Continue to pray for the staff who lead so well at the churches. God's kingdom needs it, and we need them as well. So thanks for letting me do that. We started a series last week called Just Jesus, and if you're not familiar with it, or maybe just here for the first time, maybe first time in a while, it's a series in which we're just kind of spotlighting Jesus. We thought, well, that's probably a really good thing to do at church. And so it's not super creative, it's just about Jesus. It's really because if you've ever been asked what was church about, there's always one answer, Jesus, right? And so we want to make this really simple for you. But every single week, we're taking a little bit of time. We're just kind of spotlighting, doing our best to kind of discover more of who Jesus is. Now, there's lots of ways to learn about somebody, right? You can do it by looking at the clothes they wear, right? You can say, oh, they must be a sports fan. They're always dressed up and stuff. Or they got a black shirt and skinny jeans. They must be a worship pastor. You know, there's all kinds of things. You go, I can tell a lot just by looking at somebody, right? But you can also learn a lot just by listening to somebody and reflecting on the things that they say. Well, thankfully, when it comes to Jesus, in the first century, there was a whole lot of people who recorded the things that Jesus said. And one of them was a guy named Matthew. He's actually a disciple of Jesus, and he recorded everything from the story of Jesus' birth, through his life, through his ministry, through his death, even the resurrection of Jesus. And he put this all together in this manuscript we call the Gospel of Matthew. You can find it's the very first book of the New Testament. And it's in this book that we start to see Matthew tell us who Jesus actually is. And I want to kind of take a look at something today, because when Jesus was kind of in this season of starting off his ministry, we see with Matthew's kind of manuscript about Jesus' life, he says, hey, let me just kind of explain what this is going to be. And everybody who knew Jesus would spread the word. And when we finally catch up into this part in the book of Matthew where we learn about what Jesus was doing, he's about to give this talk that became known as the most famous sermon of all time, the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus gives it, and he's kind of reaching rock star status, because everywhere that Jesus went, crowds started to follow. Everybody would sit and go, you've got to come and hear this guy. He is amazing. He is unbelievable, much like you guys are experiencing today. And so, well, it's not me. It's also Jesus. He was very compelling, right? He was very compelling. But here's the reason why I think so many people really related to the teaching of Jesus. It's because the words of Jesus were ones where there was simple things that confounded the ways of the wise. The things that people understood, perspectives that they had all the time that Jesus would kind of challenge, and he would confront the status quo and what people believed about life and about God. And so when we read through the Sermon on the Mount over and over, Jesus kind of says, hey, listen, I know this is what you've been taught. I know this might even be the expectation you have or how you think God actually works, or more so, how you think a follower of God is supposed to behave. He says, but let me just kind of challenge your assumptions a little bit. Let me tell you who my Father really is. Let me tell you what God is actually like. And so Jesus begins this conversation. He says, I know every one of you wants to have a better life. So let me tell you how you get it. And he starts this Sermon on the Mount with these things called the Beatitudes. Now, that word's not in the Bible. It's actually just kind of a Latin phrase. But it's this idea that Jesus says, you want to be blessed? Let me tell you how. And so Jesus begins to go word by word through this text saying, here's how you can have a blessed life. And he finally arrives to this point a few verses in. And it's what we're going to talk about today. Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 5. He gets to this point saying, listen, I know you want to have a better life. Let me tell you what it looks like. Let me tell you what this is going to be. And so he starts off with things, hey, blessed are the poor in spirit. The people who recognize they have a need for God. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And he gets to this verse here, Matthew chapter 5. He says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. Now, I was having a conversation with two of my bigger kids. We call them the big kids because we have a young adopted daughter, and she's like, I'm a big kid. I'm like, we know, you're the bigger kids, right? And so I have a boy who's going into high school and a daughter who's going into 7th grade. And just a few days ago, we were having this conversation, and I was trying to explain to them that when I was their age, I didn't have cell phones. I didn't have games on my cell phones. I didn't have Xboxes to talk to my friends, right? And the look of horror on their face for a little bit. I say, here's what we had to do. If I wanted to have fun, you know what I had to do? I had to use my imagination. I had to go outside. They're like, oh, Daddy. I'm like, yeah, I had to play sports. I built danger. We would throw rocks off of a bridge. I mean, that was the fun stuff, right? And my kids looked at me like with this look of pity, like, Daddy, I am so sorry that you had to experience that growing up. And I even told myself, I remember one of my favorite games to play when I was growing up was a game called Mercy. Anyone remember this game? You would find an opponent and you would interlock fingers, right? And the goal of this game was to bend and break the opponent's fingers. That was it. That's the only point. Unless they cried out, mercy, right? Now, this was an amazing thing. And I remember having this conversation with my kids. I'm going, this is a game that we played. Like, wait, help me. Dad, you would just grab their fingers. I'm like, yeah. And you would try to break each other's hands? Yeah, it was awesome, right? Which come to think of it is probably why they invented video games. Most of the games we played growing up were extremely violent. That's what you do when you're bored. And I used to love playing this game of Mercy. And I think of that game Mercy every time I read this verse in Matthew chapter 5, when Jesus says, blessed are the merciful. See, here's the thing. Mercy is this. In fact, if you're taking notes, you can even write this down. Mercy is withholding a just punishment, right? It's having the power to do something, but choosing to withhold it, right? It's knowing that you could do something to someone, but you're choosing not to, right? Mercy is kind of saying this, you've earned this. In fact, you've actually deserve it. There is a consequence to the decisions that you have made, but I am going to hold back and pull back and give you mercy. And here's the thing, as we kind of spotlight Jesus throughout this series, one of the things that you'll discover as you follow the life of Jesus from birth to death and resurrection was his mercy. You see, you look at the life of Jesus. Jesus was tremendously powerful, but yet he showed compassion. Jesus had this ability to be able to go in and demonstrate the authority of God whenever he wanted, yet he showed mercy on misguided crowds and overlooked people. And even on the cross, Jesus showed mercy to the people who put him there. You see, Jesus was full of mercy and full of grace. You see, in the Bible, mercy and grace often go hand to hand a lot. You'll see they go together a lot. Grace is this. Grace is when God gives you something you don't deserve, right? Things like forgiveness, right? Things like purpose and meaning and favor and eternal life. There's nothing that you and I actually could do to earn God's favor or God's goodness. That is a gift of grace that God gives you. Things like salvation, right? You can't do enough good in your life and hope that the scales tip in your favor. That is grace. Grace is when God gives you something that you don't deserve. Mercy is when God doesn't give you something you do deserve, right? Just like in the game of mercy, right? You go, hey, listen, I have the power to do this. You actually deserve this consequence, right? Because you're playing this stupid game, so I'm going to break your fingers. But because you asked for mercy, I'll hold back. Right? If you ever played the game of mercy, there were two ways to lose the game of mercy. The first one was you cried out, mercy. The second way you could lose the game is you broke the grip. Right? I remember I had a friend of mine who always won at the game of mercy, not because they were the strongest, not because they have the biggest pain tolerance, but because they were one of those freaks who could bend their hand like all the way back. You know anyone like this? Yeah, don't. If you see them, just run. Just run and lock him in a shed somewhere. But this guy, he could bend his fingers all the way back, and everyone's like, well, I can't beat this guy. He never had to do it. Somehow he had this ability to bend without breaking. Here's what I started to wonder, though. I wonder if there's a lesson for us in this idea that Jesus is kind of teaching us. That one of the keys to the good life that every one of us on some level have been trying to figure out in this world. I wonder if one of the keys to the good life is Jesus saying, sometimes you're going to have to figure out how to bend without breaking, right? Because according to Jesus, there are some things that are going to happen in this world that you're just going to have to learn to deal with, that you're going to have to take some things in this life in order to have a blessed life. You're actually going to have to learn to put up with some things. You're going to have to learn to maybe stretch your perspective, change your way of thinking, overlook some things. You're going to have to learn how to bend without breaking. Right now, many of us probably know this, but I don't think there is a better testing ground for mercy than relationships. Right? Because healthy, life-giving relationships are all about those who are able to win at mercy, right? The ones who can not always worry about getting even, right? Or paying back or somehow asserting our rights or our dominance or powering up on people. Instead, those who can learn to kind of bite their tongue, who can kind of hold back their power a little bit, right? Even in this sermon that Jesus has given, we kind of see it. You see, in the very first 4 Beatitudes that Jesus kind of talks about, he's talking primarily about our relationship with God. Right? Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who have a need for God. He talks about blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the meek, for those are the ones who inherit the earth, right? He's talking about this relationship aspect with God, this vertical relationship with God. But in this 5th one, he starts us down a path that begins to deal with the horizontal relationships, right? Jesus knew something. He said, you can't fix the things around you until this relationship is right between you and your Creator. So let's start there. Everything that Jesus does comes after the first beatitude. If you don't recognize your need for God, then everything else I'm about to say isn't going to make any difference. So he starts there. The first 4 are all about that vertical relationship with God. This 5th one is about the relationship with others, how we deal with other people, how our lives are affected in those interactions. Right, and this kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Right, because Jesus told us one of the most important things to remember when he was asked this question, teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus replied, I'll tell you. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. He says this is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Look what he says. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, here's the thing. If you've grown up anywhere near church before, you've probably heard this verse before, right? But look what Jesus says next. He says, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Right? Here's what Jesus is saying. He says, hey, this is it. These are the most important things. In fact, everything else hinges on how you fulfill these two things. Right? Here's why. Because you can't do the second without the first. And you aren't doing the first if you won't do the second. He's saying everything else has little meaning if you don't prioritize your vertical relationship with God and your horizontal relationship with others. Here's the thing. You could take everything that Jesus did in his life, every sermon he gave, every parable he shared, every story he brought up, and it boils down to this simple phrase: love God, love people. That's it. You don't figure that out, then nothing else matters. That's what Jesus says. When he says all of the law, right? Everything hinges on your ability to love God and love people. So, right? So this beatitude right here, it's the very first of what theologians call the first interpersonal beatitude. All right, here's the thing what is awesome. Of all the things that Jesus could have started with, I find it fascinating that he said, hey, you want to have a better life? Then let me show you what mercy is going to have to look like. Let me show you what it looks like to be able to withhold some judgment sometimes, some power. It's almost like God in his sovereignty knew what life was going to look like in 2022. Jesus knew that not everybody that you come across is going to think like you. Not everybody is going to act like you. Not everybody that you cross paths with is going to agree with you, right? That life, while it can be beautiful and it can be joy-filled, it can also mess you up. That people can hurt you, people can frustrate you, people can drive you crazy, and that's just your spouse. Let them... Right? Some of you are like, not you, babe. No, I don't know what he's talking about at all. Yeah, I love you. Right? That's just the thing. Right? So the genius of Jesus is he knows, hey, listen, to have the kind of life that you were created for, the kind of life that you have a craving for, the good life, the blessed life, you're going to have to learn and have to show, and you're going to need mercy. You're going to have this ability to withhold power at times, and maybe even feel like you have to bend a little bit without breaking. Right? In other words, what Jesus is saying is, listen, there is a difference between being right and doing right. And oftentimes, choosing mercy means choosing which right you want to be. Right? Let me say it again. I know that sounds like a fortune cookie, so I'll say it again and kind of slow it down a little bit, because I had to read it a few times and I wrote it myself. Here's what Jesus is saying is, listen, you want to have a better life, you want to make it in this world, you are going to need mercy. And mercy is the ability to withhold your power sometimes. When you feel that you have been wronged and you are in the right, that doesn't mean it's going to give you a license to say and do certain things. So here's what Jesus is saying. There's a difference, and all of us know this. There's a difference between being right and doing right. And mercy is often choosing which right you want to be. My mama, God bless her, she had a spiritual gift where she could say yes, but she really meant no. I remember asking her, going, well, Mom, hey, listen, do you mind if I go down the street and I wanted to play, I want to do something? And I go through the checklist. Every kid knows, like, I knew I had to be back by a certain time. Check, I can do it. Right? I knew all these different things. I knew I could do this. And so I had asked my mom, hey, can I go over to my friend's house? Now, she knew who that friend was. She knew the kind of things that friend did. She knew the kind of family that he was from and somehow the choices that they were made. And she had talked to me about it, but I'm saying, hey, all my friends are going there. And my mom would say, you do what you think is right. There's a difference between me being right and me doing what is right. right? You go, well, what's that like? Think about in the life of Jesus. Jesus hung on a cross and he showed mercy to his accusers. And he showed mercy to the thief next to him. He chose to overlook his injustice and extend mercy. Do you think Jesus would have been right in saying, man, do you people know who I am? You know who my dad is? You know the kind of power I could call down angels and wipe you out. You think he would have been right in doing that? Sure. But he chose a different kind of mercy. He chose to do what God had called and asked him to do. So let me just ask you, how good are you at mercy? Not the game, but at withholding judgment and punishment. Not having to retaliate or get back at people. Not holding bitterness in your heart and wanting revenge. Not needing the last word or somehow creating tension in the relationship so that you made your point. How good are you at mercy? Especially when you have the power to do something. Jesus says, hey, the life you're looking for, blessed are the merciful. Check this out. Because they shall be shown mercy in return. See, here's the thing. If you're anything like me, when it comes to mercy, man, I can be more of a finger breaker than someone who extends mercy. There's something in me. I feel like God hardwired me to want to win. I want to win conversations. I have a hard time letting go until I see something break, especially when I've been wronged and I feel like I'm in the right. I have a hard time letting people off the hook, especially if I've been hurt. You ever been hurt by someone and the only thing you wanted to do is make sure they felt the same kind of pain that you felt? That's me. I think this is why Jesus introduces a different dimension to mercy where he says, you're going to get what you give. The one who is blessed is actually the one who gives mercy because they will be shown mercy. In fact, out of the whole story of the Sermon on the Mount, this is the only beatitude where Jesus promises reciprocal action. In other words, if you do this, you're going to get that. Right? He doesn't say, hey, listen, if you show meekness, meekness will be shown back to you. He doesn't say, if you show mourning, if you comfort others, they will mourn you. He says, no, this is the only one where the promised blessing is a direct relationship to our action and our attitude. Right? It reminds me of something that Jesus said a little bit later in this sermon. He says, hey, listen, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. See, there's this theme that goes throughout Jesus' teachings, and it's not karma. It's not the universe bringing you good things in return. Jesus is teaching a biblical principle about faith. And here it is. Faith that God's ways are higher and better than our own. And mercy is about having the faith to believe that God is in control, that we can put the full weight of our trust in him, right? Faith that God is sovereign, that God is actively involved in our lives. Right? I'll say it this way. If you want to write this down, this is a good one. You can put it on your refrigerator or on your husband's mirror, wherever you want. You can put it somewhere that you can find it and someone's going to do it. Here it is. Mercy is having the faith to believe that I can trust God to make things right. See, the reason we're not too merciful is because we feel like God has given us the right to dole out the punishment. You wronged me, so here's your choice and your consequence. Mercy is having the faith to believe that I can actually trust that God is who he says he is, that God can be my defender, that I can put my trust in God to make things right. And this is a lesson I'm still trying to figure out. And believe me, I get paid to do this stuff. But here's what I'm learning. When I really start to believe that God is in control, that he's sovereign, and he's involved in the details of my life, and that God returns mercy to anyone who's merciful, you know, I'm starting to discover There is a whole new level of freedom to that kind of life. Instead of always feeling like I'm somehow a victim or I've been wronged, I can give it all to God, go, man, this is all you, God. I need you to open up a little can of angels over there and let it come down. God, this isn't on me, this is on you. And I'm telling you, there is this freedom that comes. I don't have to live under this burden that I am solely responsible for everything, because I'm not actually the owner of my life or what happens in the lives of others. I'm just a steward. And that means that I can trust that God's got this. And that's true for my future. It's true for my finances. It's true for my marriage. It's true for my kids. It's true for our church, that God has got this. And I'm telling you, there is so much freedom that comes when I have faith like this. Right? But I think here's the tension. Here's the hypocrisy that Jesus is kind of pointing out to everybody. The reason Jesus ties our receiving mercy to our showing mercy is because I think most of us, if we're being honest, our bend is towards mercy for ourselves, but justice for everyone else. Right? I want mercy for me and justice for thee. Right? Have you ever had those days where you're going, man, listen, I've had a really rough day, so hey, listen, you got to cut me some slack. Right? I'm sorry I'm taking it out on you. I'm sorry that I'm saying things. I'm sorry. I'm just tired. I've been holding it together all day, so I didn't go crazy at work. And hey, you just have to understand, I've got a lot on my plate. Right? We want mercy for us. But when our spouse comes home and does the same thing, we're like, can you just get your emotions under control? Can you just, right? We want mercy for me and justice for everyone else. Right? And that's the issue that Jesus is kind of addressing. Right? Because Jesus knows when you live with that mindset, that pathway, that perspective is going to lead to more stress, more bitterness, more tension, more disappointment, more frustration in your life. But the good life, right? Those who have learned to experience the blessings of God are the ones who get to see their life from a biblical perspective of trusting God's character. Jesus says, hey, listen, it belongs to those who learn to trust God's ways and can actually be flexible, maybe even forgiving at times, can be freed up people who can bend without breaking, who can actually withhold their right to be right and choose what is better. Jesus says that's who the good life belongs to. It belongs to those who stop holding on to their hurts, stop holding on to those hang-ups, and instead start holding on to the hand of Jesus. Right? This is why Jesus, a few chapters later in Matthew chapter 6, he says this. He says, whoever wants to be my disciple, if you want to be a follower of Christ, because let me tell you what it's going to cost you. And make no mistake, following Jesus will cost you. He says, you want to be my disciple? You got to learn to deny yourself. You've got to give up your own way. You've got to learn to die to yourself. He says, instead, take up the cross, right? Identify with me and follow for me. Right? Here's why Jesus was saying this. I don't know, we haven't talked about it, but I'm pretty sure this is why Jesus was saying this. It's really hard to live for yourself and be merciful. See, there's something about following Jesus that will require you to lay down your rights. Lay down your right to be right. There's something about following Jesus where he's going to say, hey, listen, you actually need to put that power, that rage, that judgment, that fear, that anger, you need to just lay it down and trust me to be who I said I'm going to be. Trust me that my ways are better than your ways, and your life surrendered into my hands will always take you to a better place than anything you can do on your own. See, it's really hard to live for yourself and be merciful. But here's the thing. Mercy has to start somewhere. I think oftentimes the reason we don't show mercy is because maybe we don't think we know mercy. Maybe we haven't seen it too often in our culture. Right? We certainly live in a powder keg of conversations and culture. Mercy is not high on anybody's bucket list. It doesn't raise a lot of money. It doesn't get a lot of agendas passed. We don't see mercy demonstrated. Maybe you didn't grow up around it. Maybe you've had some relationships and you've experienced the opposite of mercy. It felt like nothing but punishment and judgment. And so maybe if it's true that we can't give what we don't have, maybe the reason we feel like we don't show mercy is because maybe we feel like we don't know mercy. I think that's why mercy can seem like such a rare commodity. And so for a lot of us, the reason we may feel like we struggle to show mercy is because we don't always know mercy. We haven't seen it on display in our life until we meet Jesus. You see, Jesus changes everything. Not too long after this message, Jesus told this story. He said, man, I want you to know who my dad is. I want you to know what it's like being in the kingdom of God, because I think some of you have a perspective about life and about God that's not right. And so he says this, he says, therefore the kingdom of heaven, it's like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. And this servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged. I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him and he began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me and I will pay it back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and he had the man thrown into prison until he could work off the debt. Well, the other servants saw what had happened and they were outraged and they went and they told their master everything that had happened. And then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, he said. I canceled all the debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? Listen to me, friends. I think Jesus' story is a great example of how a lot of us can live our lives. Instead of living our life by the law of mercy, we can often get stuck demanding justice. And this is never going to lead us to the kind of life that Jesus came to show us. You see, Jesus was showing us this parable to show us that God's mercy through Christ is actually what changes everything. God sent Jesus in the flesh to come down and say to you, to me, to all of creation, hey, listen, even though you owe this mountain of debt because of the sin and the choices that you have made, you're never going to be able to pay it back. You're never going to earn back the goodness of God. Even though you have this mountain of debt, I'm going to show you mercy. I'm going to cancel your debt and I'm going to set you free. And that was the reason Jesus came, to pay a debt that you and I couldn't know. God, in his mercy, sent Jesus to die on a cross in our place. That's mercy. And make no mistake, while that mercy is free, it wasn't cheap. And it cost Jesus his life. And I'm telling you, there is no greater mercy shown to us than that alone. And I'm telling you, that alone, if nothing else good has happened in our life, that alone is reason enough to show mercy to others. There's never been a person that walked this earth that has demonstrated this more than Jesus. Jesus was merciful. That's who he was. And as a follower of Jesus, we get to be like Jesus. Jesus says, hey, the life you're looking for, it's not found in more stuff. It's not found in getting your own way. It's not found in always being right. It's not found in power. It's not found in achievement. It's actually found in a completely different path than you're probably on. Trust me in my ways. All throughout this series, we said we're not going to be kind of filling you with a whole bunch of next steps and challenges that you've got to take. All I'm going to ask you to do today is just to reflect on Jesus the merciful this week. Take some time and think about Jesus and the mercy that he has extended to you. Think about the different ways that if you're like me, you've lived independent of him, but he's still chosen to extend mercy to us. And let that sink in. Let it change your heart. And I promise you, as it does, you will begin to grow in mercy. Jesus said, you want a better life? You want blessings? Blessed are the merciful, for mercy will be shown back to them who give it away. Would you pray with me? God, I thank you so much for the gift of Jesus, the way that you have shown us mercy when, man, we didn't deserve it. And as we take some time this week to reflect on the gift of mercy in the person of Jesus, may we let that sink into our hearts, that you loved us so much that you didn't leave us to fend for ourselves. Instead, you sent Jesus to pay a debt that we couldn't pay. And God, if nothing else good has happened in our life, that is enough. So God, we're so grateful for the person of Jesus. May we let that sink into our hearts. May we reflect on the mercy that's been shown to us. And as we do, may we grow in mercy ourselves. In Jesus' name, amen.